Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. George, good evening to you, sir.
G'day, mate. How are we?
Doing all right. Our dear fallen comrade, Chewy, who caught COVID last week. I'm sure he's doing much better. I haven't talked to him today, but if he's out there watching, we'll say, g'day, Chewy. Hope you're doing well, mate. And look forward to talking to you later on this week. But yeah, no, I'm doing all right. I've had one of those days, George. I mean, being dyslexic, I talked about this last week on our Friday show. I told a little bit about my kind of personal story about dyslexia. And one of the worst things for me is jargon. And one of the worst things for me is following along with written instructions. And today I try and spent the day trying to figure out how to activate payments from YouTube, from Patreon, and from it's two on YouTube. There's the super chats, there's the advertising revenue, and then there's Patreon as well. And I got through like half of it all and just did my head in. So I feel like I've done like a few hours work today trying to read fucking instruction forms from the IRS in America and IRD in New Zealand, and my head was spinning. So I'm pretty good, but I've had one of those days where it's very frustrating when you can't really function as well as a normal person does for various reasons. That's me anyway, my little complaint.
Yeah, I mean, my complaint isn't really a complaint, just a bit sunburnt from the sun, being in the sun, but that was pretty mean, really. It was a bit windy as well, so it wasn't too bad, you know.
It's been a cracker. I mean, the last few days in Dunedin, I think like Sunday was a bit grayer and a bit cooler, but the 2 days before that were like 23 and 18, and you know, for Dunedin, that's pretty darn good for this time of year. It's like no heat pumps on at the moment. For people who don't know, like sometimes, I don't want to call it North Island privilege, it's a bit wanky, but sometimes people make comments from where you live in the country and the experiences you have. And I know that because I grew up in Auckland, yeah. But in Dunedin, my heat pump tends to go on in March, April, and then stays on until October, November, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It just stays on like 18 degrees the whole time, like central heating, because it keeps the house warm. But we're just coming to that point where that's all getting turned off and that's all not being needed at the moment. It's quite a nice feeling to think no heat pumps. Obviously, it doesn't run the whole time because there's a thermostat, so it turns off when it's at a certain heat, but it goes on and stays on, and that's it. And so, yeah, it's. I remember when we moved here, 2014. I worked at a few little shifts in radio down here, and my big lesson about living in Dunedin wasn't that it was cooler or colder. It's actually the difference in temperature. I remember I was working for a radio station in Dunedin, just doing fill-in work, and I did the weather. And it was a day that it was like 32 degrees. And it was like, today's high is going to be 32, tomorrow's high, 11. And it was seriously like a 21 degree difference between the 2 days. And I'm like, if you want to listen about the environment or the conditions of living in Dunedin, at least, it's not that it's colder, it's that you have these massive differences in variance. So on Thursday or something, it was 24. I think on Sunday it was 12. It's really, but whereas if you live, my experience is Auckland, it's like it'll be 24 one day, then it'll be 22, then it'll be 23, then it'll be 21, you know, but you just don't get those, you know, those big massive discrepancies. That's what I experienced. And also, of course, the other thing to cover off on tonight is fucking Halloween. What a waste of time. Do you have any thoughts around Halloween, George? What do you think about this quote unquote celebration?
No, I don't have any thoughts around Halloween. I think, like, you know, any other holiday is well and truly become a sort of exercise in commercial consumption. Well, actually, no, it's not a holiday, is it? At all.
No.
So
no,
yeah.
it's a huge fucking waste of time. I think the other word you're looking for. No, I'm not saying what you would call it. It's what I would call it. I hate Halloween with a passion. I don't hate Halloween. You know what? I'd love to be in America on October 31st. That would be fascinating to actually see the origins of it and how it's treated there. In New Zealand, Halloween is a complete and utter waste of time and space. For a long time, it was a very middle class white thing. And now I guess just through time, it's become something that other people do. But to be honest, I probably saw 20 kids out today at 4 o'clock in the bright sunshine, blue sky, walking around in ghost costumes. It's just, I think it's ridiculous. We don't have to take on board everything. He says, "Get off my lawn." We don't have to take on board everything just because American movies tell us it's cool. It's just an utter waste. Anyway, it's my curmudgeon-y moment. The curmudgeon-y moment of the night by Pat. So I just hate it. I think it's a waste. Complete waste. Anyway, that's just me.
Kids love it.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's true. Like I said, I mean, where I lived, down the main road, down North Road, it's like there was like, maybe a half dozen little groups, and that's it. And they were all sort of 7-year-olds. And in the weekend, there was lots of people who were having big piss-ups on Saturday night, using Halloween as an excuse to have a piss-up, which is fine. I mean, I think that's fine because it's not really about Halloween.
Parties.
Yeah, it's not really about Halloween. It's about having a piss up and using Halloween's the byproduct, not the focus. It's like when people get pissed on, St. Patrick's Day, they're using St. Paddy's Day as the reason. They're not actually celebrating St. Paddy's Day. So there was lots of Oompa Loompas and Mario Brothers and stuff going around on Saturday night around Dunedin. But the actual trick or treating, this is what I typically do, and I didn't do it this year because no one came to our door. Lucky for them. Is if they say trick or treat, I normally say trick, and they look at me stunned because they don't know how it's supposed to work. There's a culture to it in America of tricking the person at the door or them giving you a treat. So if you say trick to them, they're supposed to play a trick on you, show you a trick, do something magical, and nobody knows that because it's not part of our culture. Curmudgeon. Yeah, there you go. Melvin's talking about it. Your toilet paper of their house, that sort of thing. If someone says trick, that's supposedly a trick. You do something like quote unquote nasty to them, that you play a trick on them. So anyway, do I sound like a boomer? Probably do, don't I? Is what it is.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's constructive. Maybe you apply this outlook to other holidays or other, constructed things, and your world might start falling apart.
What else is there? What other constructed holidays are there that has no roots in? Because I guess the only reason you have roots in this country is age, isn't it? Because you could argue all the way back to any colonized celebrations have no roots in this country, but it seems if something's been here for long enough, then it's got roots in this country. And so maybe in 100 years from now, Halloween will be huge, but at the moment it just feels like it's a bit of a waste. Do we have anything else like that? Anything else that you kind of go, it's not really part of who we are? Because like we don't celebrate Thanksgiving, for example, which is huge in America because it's not really who we are. We do celebrate Christmas, we do celebrate Easter, we do celebrate Waitangi Day. Now Matariki, because they're either a part of our origin story or a part of our, I guess, treaty story, our colonized story. Whereas Halloween just feels like a bit of a waste to me. But then I'm an old curmudgeon. I've said it 3 times now. Maybe that's why. Because as I just saw a message come in from Kim. See, look, my preschoolers loved it. So maybe when the preschoolers are 30, it'll be huge. So maybe that's what the story is going to be. But at the moment, it's not. I don't know. Yeah, I'm like Stephen. Mutter. All right. Hey, so tonight on the show, last week we talked a little bit about the Prime Minister resigning, allegedly. The accusations, suggestions, whatever it is, rumours that the PM was going to resign. I think the position that certainly I took, I don't know if we took it, but it seemed to me to be a problematic idea because who would then take the place of the person who is currently the preferred Prime Minister in the polls in New Zealand? But you never know. So that was asked of the Prime Minister today. The Prime Minister came back from Antarctica. One of the first questions on the AM show was the resignation story. Also stories in that interview, which we're going to look at, about we're getting fed some news, quote unquote news, that people don't want to come to New Zealand to work, that they're going to Australia and Canada, but not New Zealand. We're going to have a look at that as well. We're going to have a quick look at COVID tonight. Now, I said to George before we started, look, I don't want to be for you guys like, we're the bad news COVID show and that's all we talk about. But I'm really quite keen to be honest and upfront and do the news. And actually, there's some concerning things around COVID at the moment with the numbers where they're at. So we're going to give you that information. Now, what you do with it is up to you, but we're not going to shy away. Like I had a family member who went to Australia and they were like, it was so good in Australia. It was like COVID didn't exist. No one was talking about it. It wasn't on the news. And I was like, has anyone told COVID that yet? That doesn't exist anymore? So I get that some people may feel tired with this conversation, but all I'm saying to you is if it's a news story, then we'll talk about it. And today it's a news story because the numbers are out. And also, if you're in Auckland and you haven't heard yet, your brand new mayor has got some plans that are better than the 3Waters plan that the government is putting out there. So some alternates to 3Waters is it Wayne Brown? I keep wanting to say Len Brown because it used to be. It's Wayne Brown, by Mayor Wayne Brown. We'll have a look at that as well and see what those ramifications are. And just once again, let you all know what happens if 3Waters doesn't go through. And what I think, because I'm a little bit immature and a bit of a hothead, I'll tell you what I think the Labour Party should do. And you could sort of wrap it up early by saying, I reckon they should say, all right, go fuck yourself and go ruin it and then come back and talk to us when it all falls over. Spoiler. All right, let's have a look though, eh? Let's have a look at a story on from the AM show this morning. The first part of this conversation, this interview with the Prime Minister, I want to have a look at what's being said about people coming to work in, I know, hang on, I've got to do something because I have to I forgot to click a little tab. I've got a problem with my audio at the moment, George, and I have to do this and I have to do this and I have to tick the little box. Boop, there, I ticked the box and now I can share that and now the audio will come through. Apologies. If the audio doesn't come through, we're screwed, but hopefully it'll come through now. So the first part of the story, the first part of the conversation is the AM show host talking to the Prime Minister about how there's some reports that nobody wants to come to New Zealand and work. Like literally nobody wants to come to New Zealand. We'll have a look at that and then we'll have a look at some other responses around this that's been coming out at the moment as well.
We were speaking with Graham Rogers, who was at a job fair in the UK. He spoke to up to 300 people. None of them were interested in coming to New Zealand, going to Australia or Canada instead, because they were looking at visa processing times, the cost of living here, crime, housing. Does that concern you?
Well, again, actually, I read some of the reports, and again, I can't speak to what an individual recruiter has experienced, but they themselves acknowledge that some of people's perceptions there are wrong. When you look at, for instance, cost of living issues globally, New Zealand actually has had lower inflationary impacts than many of those other countries. In terms of visa processing times, they are now well down. And of course, the best reflection of that is the fact that we have 17,000 people now who have work visas and are able to come into the country. We've had 12,000 people with working holiday visas come into the country. And we have, in terms of employers going out there and seeking workers, roughly 70,000 who have those approvals then to bring in workers to fill their jobs.
Okay, but Graham's not just finding this in the UK, because he was at a job in the Philippines too. We depend on Philippines a lot for a number of industries, healthcare, rural sector. There were people bringing printouts of supermarket prices to him. I mean, that's undeniably true, right? We can't say that all those issues are not true.
Well, when she says it's undeniably true, and to be honest, for me, unless I see it, it is deniable. It still may be true, but to say it's undeniably true implies you can't argue with this supposition made by this one individual. You can, it may be true, but I don't think it's fair or accurate to say from a journalistic point of view, it's undeniably true.
I want to meet this Graham guy. Yeah, he gets around.
Well, that's the other thing. We'll talk about this in about 60 seconds. Is that I get the feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, people watching, that the AM show is pretty it feels to me at least, so I'll say feels to rather than definitely is, because maybe I've got my own bias kicking in here, but there is a right bias to most of the narrative that comes out of there. And it feels to me that they've found this one person, Graham Roger, whoever Graham Roger is, runs a recruitment company. It's not hidden, it's on their story, based out of Hamilton. And it feels like maybe he has given some information that supports the narrative, so the AM show is running with it. Now, is this a true and accurate narrative? That's the question to ask, and we are going to investigate that a bit further tonight. But let's get to the end of the story about how Graham says we're fucked.
Oh, absolutely. New Zealand has experienced increases in inflation. My point is...
Inflation,
so
cost of
Canada,
living, we
so
do
has
have
Australia,
an issue with crime.
so has the UK. And the experience that we are having is far lesser than many of those other countries. Do we have a job to do to go out and make sure that people know about the positive story that we have to tell in New Zealand? Absolutely. It's why I've been leading trade missions into really key markets for New Zealand. But what I've been finding counter to the recruiters, is that New Zealand is in demand. There is a global shortage at the moment of skills. A number of countries are competing to fill roles. However, at the same time, we still have, as I say, 17,000 work visas that have been issued for people to come into New Zealand. 12,000 people have already come in on their working holiday visas, and we expect more. But we have to keep telling the positive story about settling in New Zealand and working here.
Yeah, we have to be competitive with other countries that this recruiter says are doing a better job of that at the moment.
So there you go. There's the story set up from the AM show. Before we go on to it's not even a response to that. It's another perspective. George, you got any thoughts around what you've just heard about what Graham's told the AM show, News Hub?
No, it might come up later. I can wait.
So I don't think this is a response at all to the storyline, but by chance there was another story last night on TVNZ about what's happening in the US with healthcare workers. Let me play you 60 seconds of this so you'll get the gist of what's happening to recruiters in New Zealand, hearing from, remember, Graham says no one wants to come and work in New Zealand.
Do you just want to mute your Apple?
Oh, sorry.
Prudence Thompson's emails from America
Sorry.
just don't stop.
These are more people
Yeah.
contacting you.
Yeah.
Prue's a former nurse who runs Accent,
It's going to be fantastic for theatres.
a global medical recruitment firm out of Christchurch.
Yeah, we'll set up a Skype call. We've got nurses, physios, OTs, general physicians, family physicians, psychiatrists, and they're frightened, they're terrified at work, and I think they're looking for an out.
I mean, this is
Yeah.
crazy. You're still getting, as we speak,
Yeah,
messages from people wanting to come to New Zealand.
yeah, yeah.
And the exact date the emails avalanche started is etched in her brain.
24th, 25th June, our inboxes started pinging people who really valued the importance of the body and their rights.
So then we go into part of the story where it talks about, what the decision was. Of course, it was Roe versus Wade being overturned. The interviewer goes on a little bit later on to talk about when you started to hear from these medical professionals wanting to move to New Zealand, how did that happen and what kind of increase did you see?
How much did inquiries go up when Roe versus Wade was overturned?
They probably quadrupled from the US overnight.
And what were they saying to you?
Just how quick can I get there? What's the pathway? Are my skills needed? They want to know that New Zealand's going to be a bit of a safe haven for them and their families moving forward.
So there you go. So Graham says no one wants to come and work in New Zealand, yet other recruiters are saying we're being inundated with medical professionals who want to move here because they want to be there because of the medical professionals, especially out of America, feel unsafe and incapable of doing their jobs because of Roe versus Wade being overturned. And it's actually, to be honest, George, something I never thought of. I never thought of the positive to the rest of the mostly Western world, which is where an American would probably want to move to, the Western world, with medical professionals fleeing America rather than having to stop practicing what medicine they believe in, and risk of being, imprisoned or fined. And I never occurred to me until I saw this last night that New Zealand and other Western countries may see a positive impact from the negative Roe versus Wade being overturned in America.
Yeah, the points that the AM show brought up in terms of cost of living, like and inflation, which is horrible around the world, around the developed world, especially at the moment, post-COVID. The immigration stuff is still recovering from COVID. We're slowly, getting working visas sorted out here in New Zealand. Maybe there's been some issues around companies. We've done some stories on this about companies registering to get their people. Even that was a bit like sort of Graham Roger sort of stuff going on there. Maybe Graham Roger can be a name we use as a stand-in for this sort of stuff.
To Graham Roger that stuff.
Yeah. But it's interesting in News Hub's own article on this. They have the anecdote from Graham Roger, and then towards the end, just basically state why that is why it is the case that New Zealand is quite similar to places like the United Kingdom in terms of the consumer price index, and also that New Zealand is perceived as the second most peaceful country in the world in terms of the crime charge that the AIM show brought there via Graham Roger.
Yeah, I would think that if you're a medical professional and you're working in a situation where you wouldn't have to get, and look, I don't know exact numbers, I could look them up, but I don't have them, but, frequent people coming through your emergency department with gunshot wounds, it might be quite a nice thought to go to a different country. And I mean, you live in America, you probably earn 5 times as much as a doctor, and cost of living is certainly way less because they pay their, like, one of the things I look at sometimes, I like renovation shows, and I'm like, they spend $60,000 and they completely redo a whole house. I'm like, shit, I'm looking at getting a kitchen or a bathroom put in, and they're talking about 50 grand just to put a bathroom in. But part of the reason is because the people are working for like $7 an hour. It's like, so yeah, you can live cheaply and you can earn more because you're living in a for-profit world in the medical thing. So in other words, to me, that feels immoral, that your medical institutions are for profit. And it also feels immoral that the reason that cost of living so low is because you pay your people shit money. You could come to another country like New Zealand where it's going to be more expensive to live than it is in America, purely through economies of scale. And you're not going to earn as much, but you're going to be very, very comfortable. You're still going to be wealthy as compared to New Zealand standards. And there's a lot of stuff you're not going to have to worry about: gun violence and Roe versus Wade and, Donald Trump winning next year and whatever else may come with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the story just hinges around an assumption that a tap can be just turned on, like that during COVID. It's a very it's almost a New Zealand centric view of the world where we just expect that there's a whole lot of cheap migrant labor just standing at the door and we just need to open it. The whole world had a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
The whole world is constantly going through strife, cost of living problems, this sort of thing. And yet maybe the charge against Labor is that getting those immigration visas sorted has been shit and wonky. But that's really about it. There's not much else to it. I mean, and as there was a great comment here from Rob, if there were people who did want to come here, the attack line would be, quote, "Why is Labor not controlling immigration?" Which we have seen in the past quite a lot, right? That, there's too much.
Yeah. Yeah, look, as soon as Winston gets in, it'll be hilarious if Winston completely goes the opposite way this time around, saying more immigration, where he's banked his last 20-year career on too much immigration. So that'll be the nail in the coffin for Winston's so-called populist mentality about only going for the narrative that works as opposed to what he believes in. I also think, though, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, Graham's position as a recruiter might be correct because he may have spoken to 300 people, all of which didn't want to move to New Zealand. But that doesn't mean that nobody wants to New Zealand. I mean, we're hearing in the other story that there are tons of medical professionals from America who want to move to New Zealand. And we're always going to have, it's like, and I always apologize for using sporting analogies. It's like the reason our top rugby players stay in New Zealand is because they want that black jersey. You have to play in New Zealand to win the black jersey. New Zealand's never going to win when it comes to things like money or access to the rest of the world. You know, if you move to London, then Europe's on your doorstep, although with Brexit, it's more difficult. Let's say if you move to Paris, then Europe's on your doorstep. But there's other things here that have to attract. You know, you got to acknowledge what's not as attractive, and money could be that. And you have to play up on what is attractive, and certainly lifestyle and, you know, safety and whatever the opposite of being politically, like political honesty and that kind of thing that we always rate so highly on, is all a part of the things that are attractive. And it's the same as us. I mean, if bigger countries weren't attractive, then we wouldn't have a culture in New Zealand of 18, 19, 20-year-olds going off to do their OE, because bigger countries are exciting. Everyone wants to go to bigger countries for a while, but often people want to settle in smaller, safer, cleaner countries. So I just think that Graham's, you said it, anecdotal information might be completely accurate for what he experienced, but I feel like the AM show is then weaponizing it, meaning, look how terrible you're doing, Labour, no one wants to move here, when by chance 24 hours ago there was a story on TVNZ about how many people do want to move here, and the kinds of people that we're screaming out for, medical professionals, want to move here. It's like, tick those boxes, get them here as quick as you can. You know, fast track those mofos and get them into our our hospitals and our private surgeries and whatever else they need to. Yash. What does Simon say? Simon says New Zealand is a far better democratic state than the failing democratic state like the United States. Rose, talking about the American situation, the problems for doctors, says all killed by a loony, meaning someone suffering violence at the hands of a lunatic. Steve says, at a minimum, this report of people keen to get over here represents a significant blind spot in Graham's sampling. Yeah, but again, I'm not actually saying that what he reported was inaccurate. It might have been accurate to those 2 events he attended, but it doesn't mean necessarily it's a good sample size for what the actual truth is. And Gareth says maybe the 17,000 people who have applied for a work visa and 12,000 people who have already come in are all that we're interested in now. So there are 0 left who want to come in. Perfect balance. Maybe. All right. Anything else on that, George, before we head off to the resignation rumours?
No. All good.
All right. So let's have a look at this. Same interview from this morning on the AM show. I was asked about those persistent rumours that we talked about last week about the Prime Minister resigning and possibly before Christmas.
When we do head into the election campaign period next year, will you still be the leader of the Labour Party?
I've heard this rumour has floated around my entire 5 years in government. I have no plans to change my role as leader. I'm not going anywhere. I've said this on the show a number of times. And while I'm here, might I also dismiss the rumour that I'm relocating to New Plymouth? As lovely as a place that it is, I'm not intending to move either.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that one. But the rumours, I mean, I don't remember 5 years ago people asking if you're going to step down.
Rumours circulate, and it's just part of, the nature of the role. But this is not the first time I've had this one, and it did come up last election as well.
Okay, but so just to be clear, come the election campaign next year, you will be the leader of the Labour Party.
I am the Labour leader, and I have no plans on changing that.
Okay.
So there you go. I think that, I mean, we've had conversations before, George, about various political commentators who who've literally have said things like, if Christopher Luxon says it, why don't you believe him? Well, now Jacinda Ardern has said it. So following that same theory, we believe her. So she says it's going to be her. As far as we know, until further notice, it's going to be her. And I still can't imagine. I can't imagine stepping away from. I can imagine her stepping away from this for selfish reasons. And look, I'm not using that word in a negative. Like, we all do selfish things sometimes. I can imagine her going, I've had enough of this. You know, I've done what I could as the leader of this party. We've done what we've could to protect it. And these, I'm using these words, she never would, but these fucking ingrates, I'm up to here. I'm done. I could imagine that, but maybe that's because I'm immature and a little bit hot-headed. I don't think she'd do that, but I can't imagine anybody in the Labour circles thinking it would be a positive move for the party to have her move on, because then the question, as we asked last week, was who would replace, and there's no one.
Yeah, no, there's absolutely no one. I mean, she'll leave when they lose the election, just like everyone else does.
Yeah.
It is. I don't know. It just seemed very suspect. It was funny, sort of live last week. I sort of came around to it and started thinking of a historical sort of precedent and that sort of thing. But it still just seemed very strange. And I can't, I know what you mean in terms of just like, oh, these fuckheads, I'm out of here. But I can't imagine someone like it doing that as well.
She wouldn't. I'm saying, I guess what I'm saying is if I was in that position, I probably would, but that's because I'm immature and irresponsible and selfish. I can't imagine that the current Prime Minister would do that. But if someone's faced the tirade of abuse that this particular Prime Minister has, especially over the last 2 years, it's got to be weighing, and including, like, we haven't talked about this at all, but last week the attack on her office, and that sort of thing. I'm just like, I mean, do you recall? Now, I could be wrong if someone remembers and mention it in the chat. Do you recall, for example, John Key's partner, was her name Bronnie Key? John Key's wife, ever having any kind of attacks towards her? Whereas if you have a look at the two female Labour Prime Ministers, Prime Minister Helen Clark's husband, Peter, I can't think of his surname, used to be questioned a lot about their marriage and got challenged with things because they the lifestyle they led was, he was a lecturer at a university in New Zealand and she toured the world, and they were always questioning the marriage and they were putting it out there. And, Clark Gayford's faced several sort of attacks in this term, including, vicious rumours proven to be untrue that the police had to come out and say they're untrue. It is funny again how both those on the right not only choose to attack the partners of those on the left, but also just by chance they happen to be the female leaders. So they're attacking the male partners as well. And I don't remember that necessarily going back the other way, although I don't have a steel trap up here. If anyone can remember any of the National Party, partners being attacked, I'm talking about the prime ministers. And I'm not talking about being attacked for, potentially good reasons. So, for example, Judith Collins' husband. Yeah. Look, because I don't think there's any problem with the questions being asked around Nai Mahuta's, husband's business dealings. I think that's okay. It's when there's nothing and they're attacked.
Yeah. I was just remembering that the whole thing of basically people implying that Clark's marriage was fake and that they were both homosexual, and that sort of thing, which would have been, in the days of social media and I guess whale oil was around towards the end then, probably in some sort of proto stage in some sort of swamp and that sort of thing, which was probably pushing that kind of thing. But they would have been even more full on right now with our sort of technological connectivity. But my mind for the National Party stuff goes to basically always like business conflicts of interest. And
I guess if we're being fair, and I like to be fair, the only one I could think of is perhaps Max Key. Max Key got a bit of pushback and flack, the son of John Key. So
he's a little twerp.
But if we're playing, but I don't think it was ever like people have accused Clark Gayford of being a criminal. They might have accused Max Key of being a twat and a sport little brat, because that's sort of what he projected on his Instagram account. But I don't think anyone's ever been accused of having like you say, a sham marriage or criminal activity. That seems another layer of, gossip and from the other side. So And Jack actually echoes some of these talking about America. Can only think of Michelle Obama being attacked by the right in America. Yeah, I mean, you can put in there as well Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was her own, in and of herself, her own political figure. But certainly when Bill Clinton, got up to his shenanigans, there was some on the right saying, how did Hillary allow this to happen in her marriage? That was a vein of some people on the right, primarily the religious people. Obviously she ain't looking after her husband good enough, sort of thing. But it is, yeah. I'm forgive me because I'm thinking as we're talking here, but it does, and I mean, obviously this is going to echo thoughts of misogyny and stuff coming from the right, because these are all females that they're either attacking their partners or attacking them, and it does seem to mostly only come one way. But as I said, correct me. Tell me the examples where it goes the other way, and we'll mention them. All right, let's have a look at COVID. Because, as I said at the start, we don't want to be the woe is me, doom, COVID. But equally, we're not going to be like I had a family member going, as I said, going to Australia going, oh, it was fantastic. There was no COVID in the news and no one was talking about it on the radio. And because when it's a news story, we're going to talk about it as a news story. So let's have a look at this first, because these are the official numbers today, 20,500 for this week. So if you look at that, you'd go, that's 3,000 cases a day. However, some modelers are saying beware.
Well, back home now, and there are calls for masks on public transport to be reinstated after a jump in COVID cases in the past week. They're up to 20,522. That's over 4,000 more than the previous week. But modelers say the real number of cases could be double that, as people are slacking off on reporting and testing when symptomatic. 18 people have died in the past week and 323 are in hospital.
That's an important number, and I'll jot it down, 323. Because what we're going to do later is, and we've done this before, is we're going to have a look how many daily numbers there were the last time there was about this many people in hospital, because I think that's a way of checking apples with apples on some level.
Marking the third surge of cases this year. Alexa Cook explains.
Spring has sprung and so too has COVID. Experts linking the rise in cases to the scrapping of many restrictions 6 weeks ago.
We've seen a real increase in cases pretty much since the middle of September.
And modeller David Welch thinks many people are not testing when symptomatic. So the true number of cases could actually be more than double the official count.
40 or 50,000 a week, I would say, is probably about the actual number of infections out there.
It's not one variant driving it. There are various Omicron subvariants circulating. And as cases rise, some experts are calling for the return of certain restrictions, like masks on public transport.
Many commuters are spending hours every week jammed into an indoor environment that we know has very poor ventilation.
When we made those decisions around our health measures, we did so knowing that there would likely be an increase in cases prior to Christmas, and that is what we are experiencing.
Michael Baker also wants the government to better communicate the risk of COVID infections, especially as cases climb.
We need a very clear statement about the level of risk that everyone understands and what to do at different levels of risk.
We continue to take it seriously, and I believe the public do too.
Though perhaps not seriously enough. More than 1.5 million Kiwis eligible for the booster jab are yet to get it.
And I would strongly encourage them to get that, because that's the main thing that's keeping people out of hospital at the moment.
Only about 10% of new cases are COVID reinfections, so the virus appears to be seeking out those who've escaped it so far, especially older people who aren't as vigilant as they were earlier on in the pandemic.
They are possibly relaxing their guard a bit, getting out more, which is understandable, and getting the virus.
Because while we're relaxing, COVID isn't. Alexa Cook, News Hub.
Right, so let's have a look at one thing. So David Welsh, who's obviously a friend of the show, is that what we say, George? Friend of the show, David Welsh, has said maybe 40 to 50,000 cases a week. The official number was, let me drag it back, shall we?
They're up to...
There we go, 20,000. So he's saying double to double in a bit, right? Now, that would be 50,000 would be 7,000 cases a day. 7 sevens are 49. So he's saying it could be 7,000 cases a day. If we go back to, where is the one there? There we go, 323 in hospital. If we go back to this chart here, which has been looking at the number of hospitalizations in New Zealand for quite a long time. This goes right back to February where Omicron really started to surge. The last time it was around that number, so there's 386, 363. There's 327. So on May 24th, there was 327 in hospital. Because remember, right, if you get sick and get COVID, you don't have to phone it in. But if you get so sick that you have to go to hospital, you can't kind of go, won't bother. So I think the hospitalization and probably the wastewater testing are actually the best key markers at the moment for how many cases are out there. And this is not scientific, but I'm happy to think about these as a number. So if you go back to May 24th, when about a similar number of people were in hospital, if you go to the number of cases per day, May 24th, 7,440 per day on a rolling 7-day average. So actually, David Welsh is saying perhaps up to 7,000 a day. The last time there was 320-ish people in hospital, it was about 7,000 cases a day. I think it's fairly safe to at least assume that rather than that number of 20,000, that perhaps the number is more like the 50,000. And if it was officially 50,000, the government would bring more restrictions in, right? So this is where I will encourage you, because I don't think the government's going to do anything, because for some reason, New Zealanders have become childlike in their obstinance when it comes to keeping themselves and others healthy. Numbers said about 10% of those cases are reinfections, right? That means if it is 50,000 and it is 10%, that means 45,000 people in the last week who have yet to have COVID have gotten COVID this week. The way this thing therefore disappears, and I'm sort of, thinking in a most positive way I can, because it likely never will, or potentially never will, is to stop people getting it. The way to stop people getting it is actually to try and protect those people who haven't had it, because the people who haven't had it is where it's living at the moment. So people wearing masks, looking after themselves and those around them is still the best defense. And I had an incident over the weekend with my kids. Both of my kids went to kind of events on Saturday night. One went to a flat party where there was a band. The other one went to a friend's house where they had, dinner and a movie sort of thing. And we just said masks. We're like, you're going to a flat where there's 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds in a closed off space, doors shut, band playing. Just wear a mask. And what I said to them, which is what I've said to lots of people, is you don't wear a seatbelt for the 999 times you don't need it. You wear the seatbelt for the 1 in 1,000 times where you need it really badly, and if you don't have it, you have a really bad accident. That's what I told the kids in the weekend. And they're kids. They're going to push back. They're not going to be that happy about it. We negotiate. Like we say, so you're going to a party, if you're going to eat something, do it by an open window so at least you get some airflow, etc., etc., etc. What happened today was, and I won't identify anything, but we heard that someone involved with one of those two groups has had COVID in their household, tested positive today. And so I'm not saying what level or who it was or whether it was the party or whatever, but there has been a positive test for COVID today. So what, people at that event, whichever it was, could have all been exposed to the COVID. And that's how you get, if it was the little kids party, 6 more cases. If it was the big party, 50 more cases, just like that. And if they all had have worn a mask for those 2 hours or whatever, then the chances of getting are much reduced. Our very own Chewy got hit with it last week. It's still out there. And I would say the case numbers at the moment are more like 6, 7, 8,000 a day, not the 3,000 that the official numbers would say. So the government's not going to do anything, right? I would just encourage people. There you go. I've got them floating around still. Look after yourselves and look after those around you, because that's actually how we control this. I think I can get off my soapbox, George. And you've had it. The other thing to say is that infection that I talked about from one of those groups, I don't know this, but it feels like it could be BQ 1.1 because of the symptoms that come with it. and it's with a particular group of people who had COVID within the last 3 months. So whilst the numbers at the moment are saying 10% of the cases are reinfections, that's probably because BA5 is still the dominant strain. When BQ 1.1 becomes a dominant strain, I think what you'll find, again, not a science person here, but do a lot of reading, I think what you'll find is those people who are living pretty free and easy at the moment because they've had Omicron may not have that same protection. So just, I guess all I'm saying is beware. Just beware, look after yourselves, look after those around you. Yeah, now I'm off my soapbox, George.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of scary, and I'm sort of thinking back to how I've been acting in terms of precautions and that kind of thing, and it's been a while now since I had COVID as well, so that makes things even more scary that, you know, it's out there and it's been a while since I've had COVID, so any sort of protection or whatever is well and truly gone.
Well, I don't think it probably hasn't gone to the BA5, which is still the dominant strain. But I don't know this for sure. Maybe we'll try and get Anna or David back on and ask them these questions in the next couple of days. But it seems that BQ 1.1, which is I think still an Omicron, but I think it seems to be not giving the people who have had Omicron the same protection as BA5 had. Because it seemed that with BA5, if you'd had any kind of Omicron, you're almost a superhero to it. That doesn't seem to be the case with BQ 1.1. But layman's, we will double check on that and give you information when we can get somebody on to talk about it. Free Soul says now the cruise ships are back, 150 cases on the last one in our port. Really? I did not know that, Free Soul. Gosh. Remember when it all started? There was those cruise ships that got stuck out at ports, and when they first started off, and there was the list of countries that had them, at the bottom of the list of countries, there was like 3 cruise ships because there was thousands of cases in those cruise ships.
I did notice here in Dunedin that the you know, like places like the gift shops and pharmacies and stuff that they will go to are full of cruise ship people again.
Well, the other thing to remember though as well, and I'll look, I don't want to be judgy too much, but I'll say if you're not feeling well, fucking stay home. At the moment, when you go out and about and you see someone going who doesn't have a mask on, and then they try and say, I've just got a cold, it's like, you don't know yet. You just don't know. Like, the world we should be moving into is now a world that if you're not feeling well, especially with cold type symptoms, you should not be going to work. You should not be going out in the public. That's the world we live in now. And at the very least, if you do, you should wear a mask. I had the flu 2 weeks ago, tested negative all the way through. So, you know, unless I beat all the tests and no one else in my house got it, it was the flu. But, you know, I still have this kind of asthma cough that stays on. So one of the reasons it's not the main reason, but I'm aware one of the reasons I'm wearing a mask when I'm out and about is I was still coughing for a while. And that was one of the reasons I was wearing it. I didn't want to be beside someone in the supermarket and have them kind of go, whoop, cough, because, you know, it's if you're sick, stay home. Or at least, at the very least, if you're going to go out with a cough or something, wear a fucking mask. It's not that big of imposition, really. It's not. Anywho, anything else on that, George? I mean, you've had it. I mean, you certainly, I mean, like Mick said something as well. Mick says, wouldn't worry about those getting it, worry about the people who has had it 3 times already. On some level, that's true as well. People say that you're more susceptible to getting a worse dose if you have it, you know, multiple times. No guarantees for people who have had it. What I don't want to be is a fearmonger, but I think we can worry about all of them, you know. Yeah, I mean, you had it, George. It's not the best, and I'm sure you don't want it again, and that's the thing we should all be doing. No one should want it, and we should be doing what we can to try and not get it.
Yeah, I think I might start being a bit more careful than I have been. I've been pretty blasé about it.
It just doesn't feel difficult. I mean, to be honest, you know, I was at the supermarket today. I've got a couple of those masks on my wing mirror, on my reversing mirror in the car. You pull it on. You know, people look. I haven't had a bad interaction yet. Like people, you know, people are like, oh, I don't want to wear one in public. You know, it's like, well, get over yourself. You know, I said to one of my kids last week, I'm like, if you knew without question that COVID was in that room you're going into, like if you knew that one of the people there had COVID, what would you do? And they went, I probably wouldn't go. I went, okay, yeah, that's probably the smart decision. Probably wouldn't go. But let's say you got there and you found out when you were already in the room that someone had it on. How would you feel safest? And they went with a mask. I'm like, yeah, it's how it goes. If you knew without question that you were going to roll your car tomorrow and you're someone who doesn't typically wear a seatbelt, but you knew that there was no way you could, it was fate, it was going to happen, then you would probably put your seatbelt on, you know? So the reason we put the seatbelt on is in case we roll the car, not even in case we roll the car, in case someone else causes the situation where the car is rolled. Like if someone else causes a situation where COVID comes into your vicinity, that's why you wear a mask. And look, I'm sort of waiting. I'm not in my 50s quite yet, so I'm not due the next booster, but I'm also hoping that the new BQ 1.1, or at least the Omicron booster vaccine, is going to be available to us soon. And when it does, I'll certainly be getting that. That's what I'll be doing as well. I would encourage everyone to get their boosters. And I know for a very, 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 very insignificant, tiny, itsy bitsy, teeny percentage of people, it can be hazardous. I'm not downplaying that for some of the serious natures, but the reason that the rest of us get it is so for the people who find it hazardous, they are also protected, because our vaccines protect them. And I also know, let's not debate now about it's getting past the vaccine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a new Omicron one coming, and yeah, we do what we can. We do what we can. All right. If there's anything else on that, George, you're welcome to chuck it out there. If there's not, was there anything in the chat that we want to put out there? Melvin says some people don't return a positive test till a few days after getting symptoms. Yeah, there was a very direct message when Omicron came out, and they said the rat test that you use will turn positive when you are infectious. And again, I'm not offering medical advice, but I know we have had probably 3 close calls with COVID, and every one of them we've followed that routine, and at no time has COVID then turned up. Now, this new symptom, this new one out there, I don't know if that's going to be the same. I don't know if it's the same, but up until now, it seems to have been when you test positive with a rat, that's when you're infectious. In fact, when I say it seems to be, that is actually the advice that was given out. So it's more than just me saying that. That was advice that was given. But I guess I've got to be careful and say that's not necessarily the advice now, because I don't know how that interacts with, you know, the new variants. But that certainly was the advice. And I know that, not that this part of the story matters, but the situation that I just talked about, where someone has an infectious in their household again, I know that not that it's all about my kids, it's about everybody, but because they are my kids and they were there when they were around the situation, they had tested negative. So fingers crossed again, for us at least, that they were only around them when they tested negative. And I hope they don't have COVID, these people they were with, but if they do, you know, fingers crossed that they were at least at home tested positive. They weren't out amongst the community when testing positive. And if you're a parent and your kid wakes up with a scratchy throat, keep them home. You know, don't send them to school, keep them home. That's another way we look after our community, be that your school kids, colleagues, teachers, that kind of thing as well. Yeah. Anyway, I feel like I'm still on my soapbox. I'll try and get off it. It's a long way down sometimes, unfortunately. Alrighty. Hey, let's have a look at one more thing tonight to do with 3Waters. Because we, as is always the case, we want to try and give you as much information as we can. If you're in Auckland, if you're in Canterbury, and I think if you're in Waimakariri as well, there are some councils who are kind of coming together to try and find, as the headline says off One News, an alternative vision for 3Waters. Let's have a look what One News had to say.
Divisive, ugly, and time for something else. The new mayors of our 2 biggest cities are combining forces with their own way through the 3Waters reform. Auckland's Wayne Brown and Christchurch's Phil Major have come up with a battle plan which keeps elements of existing proposals and completely changes others. Kim Baker-Wilson has the details.
3Waters and 2 big city mayors with one plan of their own.
And the government's plan just will not work.
If 2 Cantabrians and an Aucklander can get together and agree on this as a good starting point, the sky's the limit.
The second Cantab, Waimakariri's mayor, who they say this plan's largely driven by.
We are not against reform. It's just the way the government's going about it, and there's a better way, and that's what we've outlined today.
So what they're saying is we don't want to be told what to do. That's actually what they're saying. We don't want to be told what to do. Because it's the way they're doing it. So what they're basically saying is, something needs to happen, but we don't want them to tell us how to do it. But something needs to happen. The problem is successive councils, the countrywide haven't done anything about it, which is why you've got some areas now who literally will never be able to afford to have the upgrades. So councils haven't done something about it up until this point. And so the government stepped in and say, we're going to do something about it. Now, without question, the messaging by the government has been shithouse on this, has not been good, has not been clever, and has allowed some people to kind of grab it and paint their own narrative from it. And it's been detrimental to the overall messaging. But remember, if you're in a region that needs a lot of investment, to have a mayor say the government's doing it the wrong way, what's happened for the past 50 years is it's likely that your local council has also done it the wrong way. So why would they all of a sudden get better? Why would they all of a sudden be like, yep, we've got it under control, we've got it under control. Well, hang on, if you had it under control, why wasn't it sorted out 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago? Why is it just being sorted out now because you don't like being told what to do by a central body? All right, have a bit more.
And what are they outlining? The 4 big water entities spanning the country would go. Assets would stay locally owned, with existing authorities encouraged to merge into regional water organisations. They'd be funded from a new water infrastructure fund. Kaumata Arawai, the new water regulator, would stay. Other things watered down.
And nobody has been able to say why Northlanders will be better off with Aucklanders running their 40 separate water schemes.
It's such a stupid argument. Nobody would say why Northlanders will be better off with Aucklanders running their water scheme. That's not 3Waters. No one's saying that Auckland is going to run Northland. There's going to be boards for all of these spaces. And if you followed that example, right, if you followed the example of everyone should be localized, how many other national body organizations and groups, be it DHBs, be it, I don't know, regional police, should also be broken up? Because who the fuck is to say Invercargill shouldn't be run by Dunedin when it comes to the police? Invercargill should have its own police. It's just such a stupid, unintelligent conversation to say decisions get made in Auckland, therefore bad for Northland. Decisions get made in Christchurch, therefore bad for Dunedin. It's a stupid argument. Now, could bad decisions be made for Dunedin from Christchurch? They could be, but it doesn't mean they will be. And the way these guys are selling it is if a decision gets made in Auckland, then that's going to be bad for Northland. It's such horseshit, and it's such dim-witted policy, in my opinion.
Loose ball that's popped out of a really nasty ruck.
Yet more pressure against key government plans for stormwater, wastewater and drinking water.
What it says is that the government's proposals are totally dead in the water, and it's an utter rejection of the government's plans.
The government says its ears are open.
But our bottom line is we don't want to change those matters which are focused on keeping cost of living in check. Without reform, ratepayers will see increases in their water bills.
And remember, that was the Prime Minister's messaging now is this. Why did none of these mayors kind of, what do you call it when you put out positions for why I want to be your mayor? I want to be your mayor because I want to increase your rates by X amount to pay for our pipes. No one did that part of the conversation. They just all went, government shouldn't control our pipes, which is not actually what 3Waters is either. But none of them went, so we're going to increase your rates by this much to pay for it, which is actually a part of this conversation. They just went no to the government. They didn't say yes to the extra money ratepayers are going to be paying, which is now the messaging the government's going to be going with.
She says the legislation's on track to pass before the election.
Well, the government has the numbers to push it through in its present form. We would hope that they would take a pause.
The mayors say it's not a fight, just a push for agreement.
But it's been a bit of argy-bargy going on, and we don't need that.
What they do need is to see how many more mayors will back their plan. Kim Baker-Wilson, One News.
So let's have a look at one thing, George, before we just open it up to the conversation. So this is Waimakariri District Council, yeah? This is what their current annual 3Waters, if you include all those things, fees are, right? About $1,100, $1,100 a year. Now that is going to increase if there is a reform, and this is kind of a 30-year projection, to about $1,600 a year. With no reform, it's going to increase to about $3,000 a year. So why isn't that mayor the mayor from Waimakariri saying to the people of Waimakariri, so here's the choice, guys. We either go with the government and that keeps our costs down by a lot, or we own it ourselves and we go our own way, whatever wording he wants to use, and it doubles in price and you guys pay for it. Why isn't he not saying that? Because that's the reality. If you look at all, and the other thing to know as well is listening to Auckland, actually, I think the rest of the country need to be careful because they're pretty sweet no matter what, because they've got an urban population base. So at the moment for their kind of 3Waters, average ratepayer pays about $1,000 a year. Without 3Waters, it's going to go to about 2,000. That's not that much of a jump, but with 3Waters, it goes down by 20% to $800. So actually for Aucklanders, right, the mayor should be saying to you, if we go with 3Waters, you're going to be saving 20% for the next 30 years. If we don't, you're going to be doubling your income, and then see what ratepayers have got to say about it. And it's a similar number for Christchurch as well. These are the numbers. And you can go to, if you just, maybe I'll put this in the link if you want to find it and have a look for yourself. Here's the Christchurch one as well. So not about 1,000 at the moment. It's going to go to about 1,600, but without 3Waters, it's going to go to 2,700. So if there's a vote in these councils in these cities and regions, and they say, yeah, I'm more than happy to pay 3,000 a year for my rates, for my 3Waters rates, that's for the 3Waters component, I'm happy for that, about 3,000 as opposed to 1,600, then I would say that those mayors have a mandate. But without that part of the conversation with the ratepayers, I think that they're just all blowing smoke and using those tired, tropey talking points that have gone right through the election series and process so far.
Yeah, the flack around 3Waters definitely wasn't attached to the whole co-governance debate, right? And the sort of red meat that Seymour was chucking out there. Basically, that it's going to be a whole bunch of Maoris in Wellington that are going to control all our water infrastructure and that sort of thing. As for this proposal itself, though, I don't know. Ardern sort of gave it the benefit of the doubt. And in terms of Wayne Brown's rhetoric and position, this does sort of seem like not a compromise, but it's a lot more constructive than where he was at a week or two ago, where he was sending letters to the water infrastructure people in Auckland saying, stop doing this and give the money back. And they were like, what money are you talking about? It's not our money, it's the government's money. And also you can't tell us what to do, which was a much more confrontational approach from Wayne Brown, comparative to this anyway. So I don't know, maybe in terms of 3Waters' future or the effectiveness of it, this approach from the people against it is a lot better than when they were sending these nutty letters to their infrastructure people saying, stop what you're doing. Yeah, I don't know.
The actual 3Waters legislation as well, for complete clarity, when talking about we want to own our own assets, own our own pipes, this is actually what it says. This is directly from the DIA, right? Will communities still own the water infrastructure is the question. The government is not confiscating, buying or selling assets, just proposing to introduce a better, safer, more cost-effective way of ensuring that our communities have good quality water services for generations to come. The communities that have paid for existing assets will continue to receive these services. The underground pipes are staying where they are. Councils will collectively own the water service entities, providing services for their district on behalf of their communities. Communities will therefore retain an influence on 3Water assets and services through their council and through other consumer and community interest forums. Now, it doesn't say, for example, Dunedin Council will still own Dunedin Pipes, but it does say councils will collectively own the water services entities. The water services entities will own the pipes and the councils will own the entities. So it says blatantly here the government is not confiscating, the government is not buying, the government is not selling assets. So I do think there's a bit of a red herring. I'm not saying it's going to be exactly as it is right now, but I think there is also a bit of a red herring when they start saying about, we want to keep ownership of our assets. Well, I read it again. Councils will collectively own water services entities, providing services for their district on behalf of their communities.
Yeah,
So the
in fact,
government
there's
won't own it. Councils will own it.
In fact, there's a clause that makes it illegal to privatise as well, which would protect these this infrastructure that these mayors are so proud of.
Yeah, and look, I guess George and I are speaking from a place that's quite, I don't know if privilege is the right word, but certainly our council's done pretty good with our pipes, and in Dunedin, our drinking water is pretty good, our wastewater is pretty good, our stormwater needs work. There are other places that all three of them are terrible. And the flip side to this is I found it ironic in the conversation from, I think it was One News, wasn't it, where these groups that don't seem to want to have what they think is government control still want government money. They still want the centralized money to come in and let them do what they want. It's almost like they're saying, we'll take your money, but we're not going to take your direction. I'm like, I kind of feel like, and this is the immature side of me going out. Look, Jessica's saying here as well, the councils don't own the entities. All I'm doing is reading out the literal legislation here that says councils will collectively own their water services entities.
Yeah, expand what you mean, Jessica, because we're interested in what you're trying to say, but
because this is the DIO.
The issue with the word own, maybe, I don't know. I don't know what they're picking up on there.
I kind of feel like, maybe the immature side of me kind of goes, I wonder if Labor should just go, oh, well, off you go then. Look after it yourself. But, we played a few in the last couple of weeks, conversations towards Liz Truss from her own MPs. And her own MPs were going to all those people who voted Liz Truss in, remember where you were. Remember what you have done. You will be held accountable. I kind of feel like the Labor Party, or the government, let's just call it the government, because there's more entities than just the Labor Party, but the government should do that now and kind of go, fine, have at it. No centralized money. You guys want to run it all yourselves, run it all yourselves. But ratepayers, remember this moment. Remember where you are when your councils took this opportunity away from you. And when it goes pear-shaped and your rates increase threefold, remember who tried to get this working for you in a better way. Off you go, guys. Do it for yourself. Off you go. Clutha, Havelock North, you places. Yeah, we won't worry so much about your broken systems. You can just all turn into Texas and have broken infrastructure, and, good luck to your third world country. Probably Auckland, probably Dunedin, probably Christchurch, where there's good population bases. You guys will be fine. Rural New Zealand, the place where groundswell's got into the middle of and sowed dissension about all of this, you will be the ones that are fucked most of all for rejecting this, because it's rural New Zealand that can't raise the money to fix their infrastructure because they don't have the ratepayer base or the population base. It's actually the urban areas that are going to be okay either way. It's the rural areas that are most screwed about this whole thing. So just, I know they'd never do that, and I know this is my slightly facetious side coming out, but, I feel like going, have at it. Okay, that's what you want. If you want to run it yourself, go for it. See you in 15 years' time when it all comes crashing down around you. And start the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games for 3Waters.
Yeah, obviously that's silly, but point taken. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, look, Havelock North. Look, that's the thing. Havelock North had people die because of their drinking water. It's
exactly, yeah.
And I'll say this again. I consider what happened at Havelock North and other areas where there is infrastructure dangers to be a national emergency. Therefore, it's okay for the whole country to get around the regions that need help with their infrastructure. However, that also means it's okay for the whole country, via our representatives in Wellington, to say how that money is going to be allotted and spent. that's appropriate, right? The whole country's money goes into your region, then the whole country via our representatives can have an input to how that's being spent and worked on. Or you can leave it to your ratepayers' money and do whatever the fuck you want and see how that works out. You can't kind of go, don't tell us what to do, but we'll keep your money. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. Sorry, doesn't work that way, in my opinion. So how do you want it? Do you want to have your own infrastructure, run it yourself, pay for it yourself, rates go up, infrastructure more expensive? Because remember, if you buy 1 million widgets, which you would as a centralized group, they're far, far, far less per widget than if you buy 1,000 of them because you've got a much smaller group. The fixing of them, the running of them, all of that will be much more expensive in smaller entities. But if that's what you want, at least be honest about it and don't point towards big bad boogeyman in Wellington. Point towards, I'm happy to put my hand in my pocket as a ratepayer and pay double what I'm paying right now to keep ownership. That's the conversation we should be having.
Cool. Just responding to Jessica here, please do. Anything around this stuff is I'm always keen to figure out the ins and outs of it a bit more.
Yep, and an easy way.
It's complicated. It's over
If you want to contact with us or send us anything, there you go, bottom of the screen right now. Really easy way you can do it is via the Facebook page. Because you can send us a message via the Facebook page. You can attach things to it and let us know what's going on. Or if you've got something else, like I saw someone earlier putting a link in the chat as well. I forget if it's an online thing, you can just put a link in the chat and we can see it. But if you've got something to actually send us,
we've got a Discord.
Discord as well.
We've got a Discord.
Yep. Oh, look, there we go. There's a good example from America. Mark says Flint, lead in their pipes. In fact, remember, this is the other thing we had last week. We had the conversation around lead. The thing is about this, right? It's like something has to happen because at the moment the infrastructure is broken, right? So something's got to happen. In many places, even in the places where it's good, there's still lead in the water and lead in the pipes, for example. So the only real conversation is, do you want central government to do this with central government money, or do you want to do it yourself with your own money? Make that choice, right? If you central money and you're one of the places that's worst off, I think is it 300 million needs to go into Clutha, that's the number I've called out a few times, then that can actually come from the consolidated pot. Otherwise, each ratepayer in that region might have to stump up with $5,000 a year for the next 30 years to pay for it. Whatever the numbers are. Let's have an honest conversation. Sai says Palmy is screwed. We're looking at 350 million to 1.2 billion to upgrade our sewage systems. Let's just do a real quick search. How many ratepayers? P-A-Y-E-R-S in P-A-L-M-E-R-S-C-O-N North? Let's have a look, shall we? Can we find out how many ratepayers are in Palmerston North? Because what I'd like to be able to then do is go, let's take a mid-range from this, which would be about 700 million, and divide it by the number of ratepayers. And then you'll get how much each ratepayer will need to pay to go it alone. I don't think I'm going to be able to find that number. I don't think I'm going to be able to. Anyway, you get the point. Si, you want to do that for yourself? Take 700 million, midpoint, divide it by the number of ratepayers, see how much you're going to...
The resource you were showing before would do that, right? So that's basically what they were doing.
I guess so. So what did we say? Palmerston North. Let's have a look, And then we'll go home. Palmerston North City Council. Palmerston North. Oh, there you go. So currently $500. See, look, Si, the reason that it's going to cost so much to upgrade is your fucking council has not been increased. Look, $500 a year. Are you kidding me? This is the thing, right? Successive councils across the whole country, because no one wants to hire a mayor that's going to say, I'm going to double your rates. But the reason there hasn't been an injection of rates for the past 50 years and a significant amount has led to places like, as Si reports, Palmerston North needing $700 million. And there's the example. There you go. Because you're currently only paying $500. That's going to go to $3,000 with no 3Waters. And if it does go to 3Waters, it's still going to nearly triple. Well, it's going to double and a half, but that's a lot better than going up. What's that? 6-fold, 6.5-fold. So there you go. There's the answer. Shall I do this? I'll do this, and I'll put this in the chat. Copy. I'll put this in the chat. Then if you want to look at your own region, and look, I would just encourage you to talk to your councillors and stuff. This is why they're there. And I'm putting it in the chat right now. Just put it in the chat. And just say to them, how much will my rates increase if we do this ourselves? How much will they increase if we go with the government? Is there a way we can get the money out of the government but not come under any of their legislation? I think you'll struggle with that one, but ask the question. All right, I think we're done. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you tonight. Hey, George, it's cool to chat with you again, mate. It's nice to have you on board. And yeah, that 3Waters. Look, what we'll try and do as well, if you're with us tomorrow night or maybe Wednesday night, is I'll try and get a couple of the our COVID friends on, whether it's Anna Brooks or David Welsh or Michael Plank or someone, just to have a look at where we're at. Because what I want to know, this is what I've enjoyed most about doing the show on some level, is being able to go, I've said this many times, you know, we're not a voice piece for the government when it comes to COVID. In fact, we've been very critical of some of their response. We don't go to the ninth floor for our advice. We go to the laboratories and we go to the academics. The people who are actually doing the work are the people on this show who have been telling us what's going on. So we'll try and go to some of those people this week, because what I want to know is tell us about BQ 1.1, tell about, you know, the response that seems to be happening between people who have had it and are catching it again now. Is BQ 1.1 going to be similar to BA5, meaning if you've had an Omicron, you're going to be pretty much protected from it? What does the research show? We will do that through this week. So join us again through the week. There's the Discord going along the bottom. I didn't put the link for this site here on the page. I just put it on the in the chat, so you can go and find that yourself and look up your own area, your own region. Other than that, we'll be back tomorrow night from 10 p.m. I think that's all for now. George, you're a beautiful man. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Oh, a quick shout out to Lula in Brazil for winning the election very close against Bolsonaro.
So Bolsonaro's gone. John Key will be upset because he would have voted for Bolsonaro. That's what that's what he told us all.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So some good news from over there. But yeah.
Maybe we look at that tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right, guys. All the best. Stay safe. Wear your mask if you want. I'm going to wear mine. You can wear yours if you want. Just an idea. And we'll catch you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition. Oh, hang on. Should we do one thing before we go? Because I know this is that George is a little bit sad, but it's really the only reason half of them show up. I know that. I'm not an idiot. Before we go, we'll just say, there we go. You aware of this as well, George? You don't feel belittled by this? This is half of the reason people turn up. It's just to see Nala. You do know that?
Yeah.
I know that. We do this. We'll do this. We'll just be in the background. You right? All right, mate. It's time for us to go, yeah? All right, we're going to go. All right, team. Catch you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition of Big Hero News. Hooroo. Oh, yawny yawn. Oh, big yawn, stretchy yawn. Good night.